I have to say, whilst I'm absolutely delighted to be here today to speak to you, it's not something I particularly relish, speaking in front of people. And to be honest, in speaking about myself isn't my thing either. So I hope you feel very honoured that I've got over myself and come here today. And it's because I feel so passionate about what we're talking about. And, you know, it's a really important topic, and it's really great as well to meet all of you. So I think I do feel lucky in my career. There's been some great successes, but there've also been a number of very bumpy moments. And when I think about the things, at the times when it's felt a bit more difficult, it's often been when I've been struggling with confidence. And what's behind that often has been, maybe I've been looking around people and thinking, those are the people that are being successful here. I don't think I'm anything like those people. I'm not really sure that I fit in. I feel quite different from many of my colleagues. Now, with the benefit of hindsight, actually, it's often been those differences that have actually helped me and made me successful. And luckily, the people I've worked with have recognised that. It's just that I didn't really recognise it, at the time, at least. And as a result, often, instead of really capitalising on the differences, I've often tried to minimise them in the desire to fit in. So one of the reasons I'm pleased to speak to you today is because it's taken me quite a long time to work all this out for myself. It would be brilliant if I can help accelerate other people along the way so they get there just that bit faster than I did. I'm trying to work out slide clicking and also reading, so apologies. I think I'm one slide behind. There we go. So that's what I mean about making your differences work for you, and that's what I'd like to talk to you about today. I think the other thing about differences that's increasingly important to me as I go about my business, because I've got the responsibility of looking after our developing businesses, so some of our new businesses, and it just strikes me that, innovation is absolutely critical to any successful business. And in order to innovate, you just have to have the diversity of experiences, skills, ideas. And I've definitely seen and had benefit of that more recently. We acquired a digital entertainment business called Blinkbox. If you haven't downloaded the apps, please do so. But what's great about that is we were lucky enough to bring with that business the founders and many of the original team, and bringing together digital entrepreneurs into a business where, people have spent a lot of their time in food shops has been really interesting. And the guys have had a really lovely ability to very nicely agitate and enable us to really sit up and think about things quite differently. So my perspective now on differences is very different from where it was earlier on in my career. And in fact, now when I look around at people, like I said earlier, I'm not really thinking about, are they like me or aren't they like me? I'm not looking at them in terms of, they're Tesco employees. What I'm really looking at is they're just all people. Some are like me, some aren't like me. Some are younger, some are older, some are parents, some are friends. But, they're all very different. But as I said, it wasn't always so. And for quite a part of my career, I've had that sense of just not quite fitting in. Many of you don't know me, so some of you do, but many of you don't. So I thought I'd briefly explain my career journey and explain how I've sort of grown more confident as I've gone through it. And as Janie said, I started my career in clothing at M&S, and that was just perfect for me. So the people I worked with really were just like me. They were interested in the things I was interested in, and I had loads of role models who were very similar. Very enjoyable, great start to my career, and very comfortable. But being like I am, after about 4 years, I thought, actually, maybe I'm a bit too comfortable, and I need something a bit more challenging. So I decided to move into consulting, which I knew would be different, but what I wasn't quite prepared for was quite how different. And I really had a shock to my system when I walked in, I think, on that very first day. and I just saw lines of men sitting at desks, all staring at their computer, nobody talking to anybody, and I thought I'd made an absolutely terrible mistake. I was younger, I was female, and I had a completely different set of experiences than most of the people I worked with. Of course, that was the reason I'd been hired. I just hadn't quite connected that at the time. And so over time, feeling a bit uncomfortable, I just turned up the dial on the things that made me a bit more like them. So I stopped talking about clothes and started being a bit more black and navy, and I worked on my sort of gravitas, and I felt a bit more comfortable in time. But the reality is that I probably just adapted myself that bit too much. And I learned an awful lot, that's absolutely true, but I didn't really enjoy it. And I think that is just because I couldn't really be myself at work. And the ironic thing is that probably at the times that I was most successful in that job was when I was working on projects which really capitalised on my differences, but I just hadn't really put two and two together at the time. So when I moved to Tesco in 2001, I was really pleased to be back on home turf. Back in retail, I breathed a sigh of relief. I thought, this is, I feel much more comfortable again. And I have to say my husband really encouraged this, because he said to me that he'd seen a very different person when I'd been in consulting to when I'd been at M&S. So I thought, oh, this all looks good. And I thought, given I'm moving back into retail, I do want to do something that builds on what I'd learned within consulting. So I moved into the strategy team. And when I got there, far from fitting in, I actually felt really uncomfortable, because everyone had, 2 degrees at least, MBAs, ACAs, an Oxbridge education. And again, I felt completely different. And I thought there'd been another mistake, and this time by Tesco. So this time I thought, well, how do I manage it? I know that I wasn't very comfortable last time when I adapted myself so much. So instead, I tried a slightly different approach this time. And I worked hard to develop great relationships with people who could help me. And I particularly remember very fondly the lawyers who almost literally held my hand through my very first acquisition at Tesco. I got myself on courses, and really importantly for that team, I got myself into fantasy football. But the other thing I did that I'd learned this time was also work really hard to get involved in all of the things that did make me tick, which for me were things to do with customer, retail, shops. And as a result, the big learning for me was that you tend to be most successful when you're doing something that you really are very passionate about, and that makes the big difference. So as a result, after a couple of years, my board director came to see me and asked me if I had would consider a career change, a change in direction for my career path, to become a stores director, which wasn't something I'd particularly considered. And at the time, it was quite groundbreaking for Tesco. Not now, but at the time, actually it was almost exclusively male store directors who had been in food retail all their life. So I needed a bit of convincing, and I spent the day with one of the store directors at the time, and I came back saying to my boss, I said, the thing is, I think I'd really love the job, but I just don't think I'm the person for you. I don't think I can do it like those guys. I just don't have the experience. Their way isn't my way. I'm not sure it's going to work. But I was convinced that it was going to be okay to do it my way, so I gave it a go. But one of the things I did go into it knowing is that actually I'm going to have to really adapt my leadership style here, because if you can't rely on basically being the font of all knowledge because everybody else knows more than you do, how are you going to work? And actually that's been one of the big benefits for me, because that's where I really learned the benefit of collaboration and ask more than tell. Having said all of that, it was still pretty tricky. And I particularly remember a moment when the store manager I was working with made an aside to somebody and said, tell me again who this head office girlie is that you've sent me. And interestingly, what he thought he'd do was he'd put me on produce, which is fruit and veg to you and me. And it was his test. And I'm telling you that carrying crates of King Edward spuds were pretty good for the biceps. And what I learnt was that actually during that, I just got my head down and worked hard and got on with it. And apparently, I passed the test because I didn't get emotional and burst into tears. So afterwards, he said to me, I think, you're great. You'll fit in just fine. And actually, we got on famously afterwards. But the insight for me there was that working hard and delivering on the job that you're doing today is probably one of the most important things you can do to be successful. And as a store director, as I said, I was doing it a bit differently. And one of the things I tried really hard to do was to encourage my store managers to have a life as well as work. I remember very clearly sitting in the office with one of my store managers trying to encourage him to go to his first ever parent-teachers evening. And his son was 10 at the time. And it wasn't that anybody had ever told him that he couldn't go. He just assumed it wouldn't be sort of the thing to do. So I thought that was quite an important thing that I brought into that role. And one of the things I learned is that every time I've been just that little bit braver and been a bit more like my normal self, my natural self, I've been able to be a bit more successful. And with that, I felt also more happier. And as my mum and my husband would say, a happier Jill is a happier everybody. I am the mum of 3 kids, now 3, 5 and 7. And I've got a really supportive husband, but very busy husband, and a close, extended network of family and friends, which really are what help me do what I want to do. And on a good day, I could say, I'm managing to be the parent and partner that I want to be, as well as having a career. Not every day, but on a good day I am. And really the thing that enables me with that is the support from others. And I really believe passionately that we need to create a business culture that provides that support to people so that they really feel comfortable and confident to be themselves at work. And at Tesco, we're fortunate. We're really committed to doing that, to supporting people be themselves and bring their whole self to work. And think, if you can create a culture and an environment where anyone can succeed, as well as having the time to be the good parent, to be the good friend, the member of community, or whatever is important to that individual, everyone benefits, they benefit, and the business benefits. And in order to do that, you need a lot of support. And support can be about help, advice, listening, but it also can be about just challenging. And I think, all of us can play a role of that, for each other. I know that I quite often will have a colleague saying, tell me again why you think that you can't, organise yourself to go to Thomas's nativity. And you do realise quite often the only person stopping you doing some of these things is yourself. So if we've established that it's okay to be different, and in fact, it can be more than okay, it can be positively helpful. Although, having said that, it sometimes has its time and place. And I do think that there are things that you can do to really support this happening. And many things, but for me, the 3 really important things come down to this. Be brave, don't assume, and really understand your value. So if I just talk a little bit more about those. Firstly, being brave. What do I mean by that? Well, for me, it's really about being comfortable with who you are, even if it is different from other people. And just being confident to, be clear that that's who you are. And one of the things that I think struck home for me was a few years ago, I was in a meeting with somebody I hadn't worked with before, and she came out of the meeting and she said, it's so nice to be in a meeting with someone that's open about having a family. And I was really shocked because it hadn't actually occurred to me to do anything but that. And she explained that she didn't even have a photo of her kids on her desk at work because she really thought it would put her at a disadvantage with her male colleagues if they knew that she also cared about something other than work, which I thought was so sad for both her and for the organisation, because I really don't think it's in anybody's interests to leave, half of yourself at home every day. The second, in terms of don't assume, I think, and I have given you a couple of examples already, but I think quite often we assume there are things that we have to do and that we shouldn't do, things that we can ask for and things that you can't ask for. I've been very lucky because I have had some real help on this. I was working for a great lady, Lucy Neville-Rolfe, now Dame Lucy Neville-Rolfe, and I was heavily pregnant and I was having a career discussion. So as Susan said, meant to be creating my career plan and knowing where I was going in life, and all I could think of is how am I going to survive the next handful of weeks. I really couldn't get my head into gear about what's next. And I started mumbling about, I'm just going to have to wait and see. I'm not really sure how it's going to work. And she sort of just stopped me and she said, well, you think about how what you're going to need to make it work. And then ask, because you'll be really surprised what you get when you ask. As a result, I was in a very fortunate position because when I was about 3 months into my maternity leave, my boss at the time phoned me up and actually promoted me and gave me the job of Group Strategy Director. And I was utterly thrilled whilst I was on the phone to him, and then put the phone down and thought, oh my God, how on earth am I going to do that? It's going to be impossible. And I went into one of those spirals that you do. And then I remembered Lucy's words, and I thought, actually, how could I make it work? And I thought, if I did it 4 days a week, maybe I could just make it work. And if I was clear that I couldn't travel in the same way that some of the other group strategy directors had travelled, maybe it would be okay. So I, really summoned up the courage and invited Andy to come and have a drink with me and laid it out. And I was absolutely astonished because, his response was, okay, then let's give it a go. So as a result, I, at the time, was the first business leader at that level that we'd had working part-time. I have to say, 4 days a week didn't always feel like part-time, but it did make a big difference. And again, like Susan said, that really is probably the reason I'm here, because my alternative, if I hadn't done that, would have been actually moving away from Tesco and probably moving out of my career altogether. So the next for me is understand your value. And this is something I talk all the time to people that I coach and mentor. It's amazing how many people underestimate the value they bring in work, outside of work. And when people really understand their value, it's a really virtuous circle. So the more valuable they understand themselves to be, the more confident they are, the more successful they are, the more fulfilled they are. And I'll always say to people, understand, value to Tesco, but also your value outside of Tesco, which people think is a bit of a brave thing to do because we don't exactly want people to realise they're worth lots to lots of people and go trotting off. But it doesn't tend to happen. It just tends to mean they do better actually at work. And I remember really the benefit of this, again, when I was in shops actually, having one of those moments, and I thought, this is the first time in my career where I'm not really very sure how to do a good job. I'm not sure I'm making a great success of this. And actually what's worse is I'm pretty sure my boss doesn't think I'm making a great success of it either. And I remember standing on the shop floor sort of with all of this going over in my brain and thinking, well, okay, let's get thinking about this. What's the worst thing that can happen? Well, the worst is that can happen. He thinks I'm no good. What do I do then? Well, there's probably people back in the office that still rate me. I could probably get another job back in the office. And then I started thinking about my CV and I thought, actually, my CV is looking okay now. It's looking pretty good. I'd back myself to get another job outside of Tesco. The funny thing was that after that, my performance definitely improved. And I ended up quite well rated. I mean, not the best ever store director, but, you know, definitely passable. And the only thing that had changed in all of that was my attitude and me feeling more confident about it all. For me as well, as a woman in Tesco, there's an additional value to understanding what you can bring. And that's because for us, 80% of buying decisions are made by women. And I am frequently in meetings where all we're discussing is what matters to our customer. And actually, I'm probably closer than most of the people in those meetings to the most important people in our business, which is our customers. And I can really provide good insight because I have just organised a kid's birthday party by getting on the website and doing all of that and looking for birthday cakes. You know, all of that actually is genuine. I do the weekly shop every week. I am looking for X, Y, and Z on a daily basis. And I think it really provides richness and insight on a personal level in a way that some of my colleagues actually are less able to do so. So, knowing your value, not making assumptions about what is and isn't allowed, and being brave, they're all things that I've learned along my journey to help me be just that bit more myself at work. So, just to remind you of my insights so far, firstly, really do things that you're passionate about. It makes a big difference. Secondly, work hard and deliver on what you're doing today. Do have a plan about what else you want to do, but the most important thing is really delivering on what you're doing today. And then thirdly, and I've talked about it at length, be yourself, bring yourself to work, be brave, don't assume, and really understand your value. So, how are women making their differences work for them at Tesco? Well, we're doing a number of things. Firstly, we're really working hard on diversity, and that's, you know, not just women. We've got a number of different areas of diversity that we're working hard on. We do know that the more content people are at work and outside of work, the more successful they are. And importantly, for women, we know that it's important to make them feel like it's doable and also cope with the responsibilities they have outside of work. And I know everybody has responsibilities outside of work, but you tend to find women have more than their fair share, so it's a particularly important female issue. So what's Tesco doing to help capitalise on these differences? Well, firstly, we're really focused hard on building a strong female talent pipeline. And I think, you know, we've talked about that at length today, all of us, about how important it is. In Tesco, we're doing okay. We're doing okay. So in 2007, we've increased, since 2007, we've increased the number of female directors, almost double actually, increased them by 55 directors, so double where we were, which is a good increase. We've also got 3 women on our PLC board, and we've got 3 women on our executive committee, so really good progress. But on the other hand, whilst a third of our senior management population are women, that number hasn't actually moved for 5 years, so there's plenty more to go at. And as we've discussed during this morning, when you look at the outside world, you know, whilst we've only got 15% of FTSE 100 executive committee members being women, and worse still, actually, there are 17 of the FTSE 100 that don't have a single woman on their on their executive committee. So plenty more to go at. I think we want people to feel like they can be the best person for the job, as you discussed earlier, not because they're a woman, but because, you know, or not even in spite of who they are, but because of everything that they are and everything they bring. And I think that's really important from everybody that I speak to. It's the really critical thing. We really feel that you need to identify and celebrate differences and actually foster them. And so we're going about that in a number of different ways. One of the things we're doing is we've launched a Women in Leadership programme. And this aims to develop confidence and capability of women, and it's largely in a response to research we've done which identifies the areas of training and development that women would benefit from. And the theory is that if we give them some focused development, then we can just accelerate that and increase our talent pool a little bit more quickly. So take the innate capability and just get it there a little bit faster. We've had nearly 300 women go through that programme now at Tesco. It's really great for me as well because I get to participate with that programme and meet these guys. And every time you go back, you sit in a room and they talk about what they've done differently since they last get together. And, you know, for me, I just find it so inspiring. I can get quite emotional about it, about the way that a programme like this can really make a tangible difference in a relatively short amount of time. And yeah, it's quite humbling, I think, spending time with the women. So great programme from our perspective. And actually, the proof is in the pudding, as they say. And we've had a third of the people that have gone on to that programme be promoted, and a quarter of all of those people involved are on track to be director level in Tesco. So it's really a win-win as far as I'm concerned. Outside of the Women in Leadership programme, we're also working hard on people policy. And again, we've talked about some of these things today. So how can we help with flexible working? And it is, you know, it is challenging, I think, in a retail environment when you're on 24/7. But we're working hard on it and making some small steps. More agile working as well, remote working. And actually, one of the things that we're working hardest on is one of those things that, you know, it sounds easy, but actually is quite tricky, which is just trying to make important business meetings happen within traditional business hours. Because until you can do that, people don't have the confidence that they can make commitments outside of those hours. And people find it very liberating if they can know that they can work within the hours they're meant to, and they can go and do the other things that they need to do in their life outside of that. So small things and lots to do, and actually really quite hard, but incredibly important for us to make great steps on. And then lastly, we've put together a Women in Business network, and I'm lucky enough to be the sponsor of that in Tesco. And it's a great network, and in fact, pretty similar to the sort of things that we're doing today. We aim to be able to let every woman in Tesco, so very inclusive, get involved in 2 or 3 big events that we hold over the course of the year, where we do networking, workshop learning, have some speakers, and what's on your mind. And actually, funny enough, from today, I've taken away quite a few next steps about how we can improve on some of those sessions going forward, and definitely bringing in more external perspective, I think, will help us. One of the things that we're conscious of through that, because you're talking to women at every level through the organisation rather than just on the future leadership, is how important it is for our people in Tesco to have what we would call real models, not just role models. So people that they really do identify with, because lots of our young talent are very young, they haven't got families, and so hearing some senior person rattle on about how they've got there and how they juggle work and family isn't necessarily relevant to them. What's relevant to them is how they juggle having a decent social life, unlike, you know, so they're like the rest of their friends and stay and have a fulfilling career in retail. So really conscious that there are horses for courses, and we need to be inclusive enough so that they feel like they've got someone that is like them as they go through. So coming back to where I started, and making your differences work for you really needs you to be brave, as I said. Don't make assumptions. Really understand the value you bring. And lastly, you know, support one another to be true to yourselves. Hopefully, you'll see I brought myself to work today, and you know, the thing that I think makes the biggest difference in all of this, both for ourselves and for the businesses we work in, is nurturing differences, fostering them, identifying them, celebrating them, and then supporting people to get there and be successful. So I look forward to talking to you about some of the things your organisations might be doing that are different or similar. It'd be great to learn from you. And I wish each of you success in your journey. And just please continue to support each other at events like this. Thank you.